In this session, we're going to be talking what is a cross-site script attack, right? Cross-site scripting attack, right? And in general, if we just at a high level, right, it's all about injecting malicious code, right? It's an injection type of attack, right? So let's look at our scenario here. We have our web server on the right. We have our device, our browser, essentially our web browser running on the end client here, and we have our attacker at the bottom. And what this specific attacker kind of like is focused on it's all about attacking the actual device here, right? So it's all focused on the device, but what it does, it uses the server. So our focus here of the attacker is the device here, but it uses the web server over here as a means of getting to that device, right? And really what we're trying to do here is there's, the attacker is exploiting some kind of vulnerabilities and it's injecting some kind of malicious code into the web server. So what the attacker does, it injects the malicious code into the web server, and then the client, the web browser, when it accesses the web server, is downloading that malicious browser side script, right? Because that script is going to essentially run on the browser side of things, right? So it's a browser side script, right? And by doing that, what actually happens is the malicious script that now gets downloaded on the client side, what it's able to do is able to do some malicious things. Like, for example, it can get access to the cookies, it can steal get access to the session tokens, it can access other secretive info, but basically that's what it's trying to do here, right? It's kind of like taking that information here. Now, if we look at it in a little bit of a more, different perspective here, right? One could protect against cross-site scripting using a WAF gateway. So we could actually essentially put the WAF gateway here, right? And we can use that to kind of like protect us in this kind of scenario. So that would be one way of mitigating it here, right? So the other thing we have to look at is each visit to the site, the script is activated, right? So there could be another device here, and then the same scenario happens, accesses it, and it downloads it. So you can understand the potential, the scale in which every single user that hits that web server could potentially download that browser side script, right? So that's quite a dangerous thing, right? Now, if we have cross-site scripting comes in different flavors, right? So, if we look at it, there are different types, right? So let's start off with the reflected cross-site scripting. Exactly what is that? So reflected cross-site scripting is basically when a web application or something is actually is returning an error message, or some kind of response is returning a search result or something based on user input, right? And as that information is then retrieved, right, the script can be moved back, or the data can be moved back, and when it gets to the browser, is actually the data is being made safe to render. It's not happening in that context, right? So, but in this instance, it's without storing the data permanently. We're not storing the data, and that's where the stored cross-site scripting comes in place, right? In this instance, we're storing information. It's more persistent, unlike the reflected one, which is non-persistent, right? So in this instance, when the user input is entered, is stored on some kind of backend database or something like that, and then later retrieved, the stored data, and the web application, again, without the data, is being made safe to render in the browser, right? So again, that's the same problem that we have. And then the DOM-based cross-site scripting, eventually what actually happens is in that scenario, the data never actually leaves the browser, right? It's all about the entire flow stays inside the browser, and you're able to access the actual URLs and other information there. So this kind of like, in this specific example, we focused on the cross-site scripting, really on the kind of like the client side, like how that was accessed. But there is another vulnerability that focuses more on the server side of things, right? But we'll cover that in a different session.